Want a huge deal on a large pizza? For a very limited time at Donato's, buy any large pizza and add a large one-topping pizza for 50% off. Yes, half off. Use promo code HALF. Donato's. Gotta love more.
The Sports Desk at the Columbus Dispatch presents the BuckeyeXtra Basketball Podcast. With your host, Ohio State basketball beat writer Adam Jardy.
Deficiencies has given me the run. Here it goes. Up and away. Slam jam bam. And now he does a little dance.
Now, the BuckeyeXtra Basketball Podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is Adam Jardy from the Columbus Dispatch. Today is Monday, April 13th, 2026, and it's my official duty to welcome you into episode 551 of the BuckeyeXtra Men's Basketball Podcast. Welcome to Jubilation City. Apologies right off the bat. I had hoped to get another podcast out to you late last week, and just kind of the way the week broke and waiting on, real concrete things to happen, there just wasn't really a great opportunity for another one until suddenly Friday, everything kind of hit, and we got two new commitments to the Ohio State men's basketball program to talk about and just kind of assess what this tells us about the portal and where things still might be headed. And that all kind of, bubbled a little bit over the weekend, and it just seemed like the thing that made the most sense was to get a podcast to you here on Monday. So happy to be back with you. We're almost halfway through the portal. We've got about 8 days until this thing closes. And obviously that doesn't mean that you can't add players once the portal is closed, but once the portal closes, players can't jump in. That's we'll have a more finite idea really of like who's actually available and who's not available, and things will start to, from a national perspective, continue to solidify, and rosters will start to solidify as we firmly move into the off season and get closer and closer to May. We're still not there with Ohio State. There's still a couple of spots available. They're still in the mix for multiple players, and this is still very much an incomplete roster at this point. And we're not going to belabor the point. Let's talk about these new additions that Ohio State has, and potentially what these new additions tell us about the roster. The Buckeyes have added Justin Pippen, a guard from the University of California who played his freshman year at the University of Michigan. And yes, you might recognize that last name. And the Buckeyes have also added a Kentucky transfer center, Andrija Jelavic. Both of these are a little bit off the radar, and there are some interesting statistics here that I think show why these could be good fits for Ohio State. There's also, they're not super highly rated when you look at the recruiting rankings, such as they are in the transfer portal rankings. Pippen is roughly a top 75, top 80 transfer, according to On3 and 24/7 Sports. Jelavic doesn't appear as a rated player. It is worth pointing out that there's, I think I saw roughly 2,000 players entering the portal. It is interesting. I'm wondering if some of what we're seeing this year, I think I talked about this in the last one, but as we await the executive order that the president issued concerning college athletics and eligibility and things like that, that's expected to go into effect on August 1st. And there's still a lot of questions about how this is all going to play out. But if that is held to the letter of the law, and players are only given one transfer without having to sit out, I think that unknown could be playing into what we're seeing nationally, and maybe even more players entering the portal than you might expect, because guys still at this point don't face any sit-out repercussions if they do decide to transfer somewhere else. So anyway, there's still a lot more to come in all this, and there are still a ton of names out there. And I'm keeping the transfer tracker updated at dispatch.com, so you can keep tabs on all the players Ohio State continues to be linked with. So keep visiting that, keep clicking on that. I'm updating that on the regular. But now we're going to talk about the guys that Ohio State got and a few things that I think this tells us about next season. Before we do that, I do want to remind you that you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you enjoy your favorite podcasts. If you subscribe, you'll automatically get the newest ones just as soon as our man Patrick Flaherty, the Podfather, can grab them and publish them for us. While you're subscribing or downloading, please leave a review. Please click 5 stars, and please consider telling a friend. Thanks to all of you who've taken the time to do all those things. Donato's is legendary for putting so many toppings on their pizzas, but just wait till you hear what they're taking off. For a very limited time, when you buy any large Donato's pizza, you can add a large one-topping pizza for 50% off. That's right, half off. You order using promo code HALF. Order your favorite large Donato's pizza and add a large one-topping pizza for half off today. Donato's, gotta love more. All right, so I want to look at, before we get into the specifics on Pippen and Jelavic, I want to look at 2 statistics from last season that I think are probably worth all of us keeping in mind as this whole thing comes together, and things that I think the coaching staff is probably prioritizing as they go through the transfer portal and as they look at next season and where Ohio State needs to continue to progress if it wants to continue to progress on the court, in the standings, in the NCAA tournament, all those things. So here's one key area that I don't, in hindsight, probably should have written more about this during the season. Sometimes you get to the end and you look up and you look at some numbers and you go, man, yikes. So Ohio State finished last season 347th in defensive steal rate, according to KenPom. So one of the roughly 20 worst teams in the nation at coming up with steals. The Buckeyes were 15th in the Big Ten in steals per game, and they finished 242nd nationally in defensive turnover rate. So this was a team that was, as we've discussed and as I wrote about, probably should have written about the offense a little bit less and the defense a little bit more. But this was a borderline historically talented offensive team last season. It was the most efficient offense for the Buckeyes since 2010-11. That team famously got knocked out by Kentucky. The loss to Thad Matta never got over. But so KenPom goes back to 96-97. This is the second best offensive performance for an Ohio State team in the history of KenPom. So the question then is like, well, why didn't they win more? Why weren't they more consistent across the board? And certainly the injuries and all those things, but also there was not enough defensive bite. This was not a team that turned teams over. Ohio State was 52nd nationally in adjusted defensive efficiency. We talked about the defensive turnover rate and the steal rate. They also didn't block many shots, 315th in block rate. So they didn't turn teams over nearly consistently enough or block enough shots to really cause issues at that end of the floor. And then when you take that and you say, okay, so they didn't turn teams over a ton and they didn't block a lot of shots. As a defense, how do you make up for that? Well, you've got to be elite rebounding, holding teams to one opportunity. If you're not going to turn them over, you can't let them get multiple opportunities at the rim or multiple shots up, rather. And Ohio State was just kind of okay at that. I did think that they made some progress collectively from a rebounding standpoint as the season went on. But Ohio State finished 158th nationally in defensive rebounding rate. They were 12th in the Big Ten in defensive rebounding percentage, and they were tied for 9th in the Big Ten in average shots allowed per game. So not necessarily taking into account just like how well teams shot, but just they allowed a fair number of shots, which again comes from you don't turn teams over, and it comes from not turning teams over. So teams are getting more shots up, and then you're the bottom third of the Big Ten in defensive rebounding percentage. That adds up to a defense that is just not good enough to win at a consistent level. And we probably didn't talk enough about this during the season because there were so many other things to talk about, but the defense wasn't where it needed to be. So let's look at Pippen and let's look at Jelavic. So if you go to KenPom, Pippen finished 98th nationally in steal rate. He was 7th in the ACC in steal percentage. And according to basketballreference.com, he was 12th in the ACC in defensive win shares. Now, I don't know how that's calculated. I can't speak in any great detail at that rate or to that. But so Pippen finished with a steal percentage of 3.5. The best player on Ohio State's roster last season was Bruce Thornton at 1.9. This was not a team that was very good at taking the ball from its opponents. Pippen is good at that. We talked about the rebounding. We talked about limiting teams to one opportunity, about controlling the glass. Now, Jelavic did not play quite as much or have as much of a statistical overall contribution as Pippen did. So in 32 games last season, Justin Pippen averaged 14. He's a 6'3", 180-pound guard. 14.2 points, 3.9 rebounds, 4.6 assists, and 1.9 steals per game for Cal last year. 32 games, all-stars, played 30.8 minutes per game. So Jelavic played 32 games. He started the last 20 for the Wildcats, and he averaged 5.5 points, 4.0 rebounds, 0.3 blocks. So he's not, despite a 6'11", 230 pound frame, the native Croatian doesn't boast great shot blocking numbers, but he is, in the minutes that he played, an effective rebounder. At KenPom, so he had a defensive rebounding percentage of 18.5% when he's on the floor. I guess that was redundant. He wouldn't have a rebounding, but sorry, people. So 18.5%. The only player on Ohio State's roster who had a better defensive rebounding percentage was Ivan Jugovan, fellow Croatian. And the two do know each other. There's some shared history between the two. But so Ivan, in his limited minutes, he 24.7% minutes, minutes percentage played for Jugovan. Jelavic more, he was at 34.7, but Jugovan had a defensive rebounding percentage of 21.6, and Jelavic was at 18.5. And this is a guy who played 15 and a half minutes a game. And this is playing at Kentucky, where obviously he's playing high level competition essentially every night and playing in an incredible spotlight. I mean, we all know what Kentucky basketball looks like, and we know the demands that are there. Again, neither of these guys, we'll get to their offense in a moment and some of their shooting, but when you look at two of the things that were the primary culprits for holding back Ohio State's defense last year, defensive rebounding, lack of steals, lack of turnovers forced, lack of defensive bite, I think both these guys probably address that. So there are some things there that make both of these additions make some sense. Even if neither of them are the quote unquote splash signing or, certainly the headline grabbing signings for Ohio State. I do think there's reasons to look at these guys and say, you can project them fitting into Ohio State and impacting the game in these ways. Now, as far as like specific roles, with Pippen's size, with his defensive abilities, he's also an effective distributor, 4.6 assists per game last season, and his assist rate was of 29.4. That was 99th nationally at KenPom. Nobody at Ohio State was nearly that high last year. So now you're going to be taking a guy who was among the nation's best at distributing the ball, top 100 in the country, and you're putting him next to junior year John Mobley, who did take significant steps in his consistency as a player. Certainly, they have asked him to become more of a playmaker and all those things, but became a more efficient overall shooter. Like, we haven't really got into like the breaking down a whole lot from last season just yet from like a specific standpoint, but his minutes went up, percentage of minutes played went up a bit. His offensive rating at KenPom went from 109.8 to 118. He was used on almost the same number of possessions, and took like 1/10 of a percentage fewer percentage of shots, if that makes sense. He took 26.5% of shots when he's on the floor as a freshman, 26.4 as a sophomore. But his shooting numbers all got better. Mobley was 39.6% from two as a freshman. He was 47.2% as a sophomore. And it was on roughly the same number of attempts. And his three-point shooting went from 38.5% as a freshman to 41.1% as a sophomore. And that was with more attempts. So he took 36 more threes as a sophomore, and he shot 26%. He went from 38.5% to 41.1%. So improvement in both areas, from two, from three. His free throw rate remained the same. But now you're taking a guy like that and putting him next to a guy who is a more gifted distributor than Bruce Thornton was. He's bigger. He has more consistent assist numbers across the board. it makes sense to me to envision a Justin Pippen next to a John Mobley and see how those two could complement each other from a size standpoint, from a shot and a distributing and a playmaking standpoint. The question that comes into this is, obviously Bruce Thornton was among one of the most efficient elite scorers in the country last season. Efficiency is not the word that would go with Justin Pippen and what we saw from him as a sophomore at Cal. So you look at his numbers, and he averaged 14.2 points, but he, overall, finished with a field goal percentage of 37%. He took 11.2 shots per game, and he made 37% of them. His numbers all, from a percentage standpoint, went up from his freshman year at Michigan, where he didn't really play a whole lot. 6.7 minutes per game, came off the bench in 28 games for the Wolverines. Sometimes when that's your role, end of game stuff and blowout stuff, like sometimes the numbers can get a little out of whack. But he went from shooting 28.6% from two as a freshman to 40.7% as the sophomore. His 3-point percentage went from 26.7 to 32.7. But you're still talking about a guy who took 5.2 threes per game and made 1.7. Not a lot there in the way of offensive efficiency. And I think one of the things that will be absolutely critical for this to work and for this team to click and for this season to get where Ohio State wants it to get is, I think that there has to be an understanding that you want a lot of shots coming from Mobley, from Bynum, and from Thompson. Like, that's in my eyes here, that's clearly the big three for Ohio State next season. And you have to look at whatever else they bring in. It seems that those pieces, they want them to certainly raise the level, and this team needs to have more depth than it did last year. But they're not coming in and saying, okay, you are going to take 4 shots a game away from John Mobley Jr., or you're going to take away shots from Bynum or from Thompson. Like, those are the guys that I think are really going to be obviously powering what this Ohio State team looks like next year. So it seems critical to me that certainly you need all those 3 guys to grow and develop and take steps and all that. But you're going to need Justin Pippen to lean into some of these things in his game, the 4.6 assists, the 1.9 steals, lean into some of that stuff and get a little bit more efficient. I can't speak to what kind of shots he was getting at Cal. As a team, the Golden Bears went 22-12 and finished 88th in adjusted offensive efficiency at Ken Palm, 68th in defensive efficiency. So not a great team, not an extraordinarily prolific offense. I should also mention Pippen drew 5.1 fouls per 40 minutes. That was 252nd nationally. See, where does that rank on Ohio State's team? I meant to look this up earlier. So Pippen at 5.1 fouls drawn per 40 minutes. Tilly drew 5.6 fouls. So Pippen's rate of fouls drawn per 40 minutes would have been second on Ohio State's team last year. So, and he's a solid free throw shooter, 81.7%. So there's some stuff there that says, okay, like, you can see it fitting next to a Mobley, and you can see it if you don't need him to go out there and be your leading scorer, but there's some games where he's potentially capable of that. Like that you can see why that could potentially work. Looking at his numbers against Tier A competition versus Tier A or B competition, and this does factor in, obviously, like that freshman year at Michigan where he didn't play a whole lot. But his numbers are, his 2-point field goal percentage drops drastically against Tier A competition, where Tier A and B, he's 40.2% from the floor from 2, and against Tier A, 29.5%. His 3-point percentage is kind of about the same, regardless of who he's playing. But that initial glance would show that he does struggle a bit from inside the arc against more talented teams. Again, like they have to find a way to fit that into how this team wants to play next season. And maybe that's, if they're able to turn teams over more, maybe some of those 2-point shots are fast break layups or transition opportunities, things that just Ohio State struggled with for large stretches of last season because they were not able to play that way. Now, looking at Jelavic, this looks like a guy who comes in battles with Josh Ojanwuna to be the starter. I think right now, well, it's not even like going on a limb to say like the starting battle is going to be between those two guys based on history and based on what we have seen over the course of their careers. I do think that you're going to see a battle between those two. Ivan Ugovan will be expected to take on a bigger role. He will play more next year. One of the things that I know they like about Jelavic is they believe they can play him at the 4 alongside either Ugovan or Ojanwuna. And unlike last year when they were talking about can they play Tilly and Ivan next to each other, like, obviously Tilly's 3-point shooting never quite materialized to that level. We didn't see a whole lot of that. I think there's more of an avenue here because Jelavic is a bit more athletic. I think he has the frame for it. He also has some shooting concerns where he came to Kentucky from Croatia, having played as a professional, and he averaged, I believe, a little bit more than a 3-pointer made per game, and that didn't translate at Kentucky. So he finished the year shooting 27.6%, and he took a fair number of them. He averaged 2.43 attempts per game, but he averaged fewer than 1 make per game. He was 21 of 76 from 3. He was 52 of 77 from inside the arc. So he finished with an effective field goal percentage of 54.6. When you look at Ohio State's numbers last year, that's actually a better effective field goal percentage than Devin Royal, better than Christoph Tilly. So this isn't a huge move the needle type of move, but they needed to bring somebody in to battle Josh to be the starter. And I do think like the expectation is probably that Josh Ojanwuna is the starter, and you could see him growing into a bigger role right up until that injury at Baylor. But they love his athleticism, his size, his frame. I was talking to somebody about him within the last week, and I just said, like last summer, getting to watch like some workout stuff, and even during the season, like when you're in the gym every now and then, and you're looking at the team, and Josh wasn't able to do things, but just seeing him walking down the hallway and seeing him sitting there, like he's a big dude. Like the first one that immediately comes to my mind is like an Evan Ravenel type of size, maybe, but like I'm not even sure that's a fair comparison. But like just a large human being who, if he is fully healthy, there's a lot to like about what that could look like on the floor. But he also will have not played a game since February of 2025. When he steps on the court in November of 2026, when Ohio State plays BYU in Salt Lake City on, I believe that's November 2nd. You're not going to go into the year assuming that someone who hasn't played in 18 months is like full go. Like right now, you got to bring in some more pieces there. And so that's where, Jelavic fits in. And this does give Ohio State 3 guys with some size down there that, all have high level experience. And Jelavic, let's see. So like I said, so he moved into starting lineup the final 20 games of the season. He wasn't especially productive at times. Like in Kentucky's 2 NCAA tournament games, he scored 2 points. He did have 12 rebounds though. So not a whole lot of like that proven production. He will also be 22. He either is 22 now or will turn 22 between now and the start of the season. So again, this isn't a guy that they're expecting to come in and be, frankly, a Dai Mara or Morez Johnson or even Yaxel Lendeborg, different players, but you get what I'm getting at here. But a guy that can be reasonably expected to come in and be a solid contributor on a team that is not necessarily going to be playing a style of basketball that's going to be centered around its center. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of Mobley, Bynum, Thompson. And then how does everything fit in around them? So it will be critical, I do think, for both of these guys to be more efficient from the floor. And maybe with Jelavic, maybe we see a little bit more of a comfort level. Maybe Ohio State's able to unlock something with him where they can play him differently. I admittedly have not done deep dives on either of these guys and how they fit into their teams last season. So we'll get more into that here as we move further into the offseason. But like I said, like with Pippen, so his effective field goal percentage of 44.6. The only Ohio State player to play in at least 10 games last season with a lower effective field goal percentage was Colin White. He was at 0.429. Now, these are the first two dominoes to fall for Ohio State. And the Buckeyes at this point have a roster consisting of John Mobley Jr., Amari Bynum, Ivan Yagovin. We'll just take Miles Hero and Braylon Nash and just kind of put them to the side here. So Yagovin, Matthew Griachich has not announced anything yet, but I don't see him back at Ohio State next year. Josh Ojamwana. Then you add in Alex Smith and Anthony Thompson, and now these two transfer portal additions. The Buckeyes are not done. They have two guards on the roster at this point, essentially. So there are going to be more additions and things I expect to pick up here this week, because you're going to start seeing guys on campus. You're going to see visitors coming. The spring game is this Saturday, so that's typically an opportunity. Like I just had photos come up on my time hop of like Jake Diebler last year at the spring game with Gabe Cupps and Brandon Knoll and Christoph Tilley, and so we'll see what that looks like and who they have on Saturday. I meant to mention this earlier. This is a quick aside, but like I was looking at like some of Pippen's random like games, and this is very out of the flow of what we were just talking about here. But I did want to mention this. Like I just picked like a kind of a game at random. So later in the season, when Cal went to Georgia Tech on March 4th, and the Golden Bears with a 76-65 win at Georgia Tech, and Pippen didn't score. And so as I'm going through it, his stats for the season, that's his only scoreless game of the year. I was like, okay, well, so he's 0 of 5 from 2, 0 of 2 from 3. But he had 2 rebounds and 8 assists in that game and 3 steals. I think that's probably something, that's the kind of stuff that tells you that if he can be effective, or I should say, the fact that he went scoreless in that game, but still had 8 assists, 3 steals, 2 rebounds. He did have 4 turnovers. So there's that. But, it's not he went 0 of 7 from the floor and he had 2 assists and 3 turnovers and that was it. Like he still was contributing on the stat sheet. So I wanted to at least note that, and I meant to do that earlier. I got a little out of order here. So again, look for Ohio State in these coming days. They're going to continue to be connected with guards. I would expect them to be guards who are able to complement what they have, build out depth, be more reliably consistent from a production standpoint, because this team has to get more bench production next season. And that is probably going to come, as we've discussed. Like they're not going to have 15 guys on the roster. Like they're going to be paying actual money to probably 11. We'll see how far that gets stretched, but there's going to be more coming this week. There's going to be multiple guys coming to campus, and it's worth pointing out that Jalen Harrelson from Notre Dame does remain in the mix, at least as we sit here at this point. Now, things often change very quickly when it comes to all this, but that is someone that is in the mix still, and would be an interesting fit for sure, and would certainly, I think, scratch that itch of like a name, a noteworthy name that I think more Ohio State fans are probably familiar with, given that he just played at Notre Dame, and certainly he's an Indiana guy. So we'll monitor that. We'll see where that goes as the week progresses. But look for more stuff to keep popping up here in these next couple of days. And as soon as there's something, I'll try to be a little bit more nimble in the next week or two. And like if we do get a commitment on Wednesday or Thursday, like instead of waiting to do a full-on 30-minute podcast, maybe I'll just try to get you some shorter ones and quickly breaking down the news and what it all means. But that's where we are on this Monday early afternoon. Buckle up, stay tuned. There's more coming, I'm sure. So I'm going to wrap this one up now. Oh, actually, I should mention that there were reports as I was getting started with the podcast that apparently Devin Royal is on a visit to Villanova today, according to a couple of Twitter reports. So now, as always, you can send along your questions, your comments, your love notes, your hate mail, and otherwise constructive criticism to me at Adam Jardy on Twitter or ajardy@dispatch.com. Thanks again for listening. Thanks to Patrick Flaherty, the Podfather, for putting this out to you all. I'll be back with you sometime soon. And once the portal does slow down, we will have on our Beat the Beat Writer Bracket Challenge winners. So that is coming. But until then, be kind, take care, and we'll talk soon. Donato's is legendary for putting so much on their pizzas, but just listen to what they're taking off. Right now, buy any large pizza and add a large one-topping pizza for half off. Use promo code HALF. Donato's, gotta love more.
Be sure and subscribe to the Buckeye Extra podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.